We're still bringing you reports from the NES. That is, of course, Nigerian Economic Summit 2025. We've dubbed it NES 31 because it's the 31st edition. And this time we're speaking with a senior economist here at the Nigerian Economic Summit group. He is Dr. Wilson Erumebor. Thank you very much, Doc, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the theme. When you hear the reform initiative, what does it speak to?
Well, I think reforms is, how it connects, how it makes life better for the average Nigerians. It's more about how do we expand the depth and breadth of the private sector, how do we create better jobs for the future, and more importantly, how do we ensure consistency in government policies and ensuring that government efficiency is also a part of the discussion, whether at the summit or even beyond, because we're talking of huge budgets that, ideally should really have an impact, positive one at that, on key economic indicators and key economic agents like the citizens. So basically, it's how do we grow Nigeria, how do we deliver a $1 trillion economy by 2030, and what are the key things that needs to be done, to achieve that.
So having mentioned these metrics that come to mind when you hear reform, where would you say we are if we were to analyze, our economic status? How would you analyze where we are?
So there's no one indicator that can best explain an economy. I mean, there are many indicators, right? There's GDP growth, inflation, unemployment, job debts, and all that.
So let's take GDP growth and let's take inflation.
Yes, so for growth, if you check the numbers, we did above 4% in the last quarter in Q2 2025, and that's something I think is good. We've historically, in the past couple of years, we've been doing 3%, 3.2%, 3.4%. So this is the first time since the second quarter of 2021 that we're delivering that high growth, the highest growth since 2021. So it's a good thing that growth is, at the range of 4.2%, I guess, from the NBS. But again, the challenge is when you look at the numbers and the drivers of growth. I think that's what is even more important than the growth itself. You would see that crude oil played a much more significant role in driving growth in the second quarter. And so what I just presented at the summit is a case where if you look at the top fastest growing sectors in Nigeria in 2023, ICT, finance, and the likes, all of these sectors put together employ just 1.5% of the Nigerian workforce. So you have a case where sectors are growing, but what's the link between job creation? What's the link between economic diversification? What's the link between reducing poverty? I think that's where a part of the problem is. How do we ensure that we're not just looking at growth, but the drivers of growth itself, and ensuring that growth delivers better employment for the people?
I want to, speak to what you've talked about, sectors growing, but we're not seeing a lot of employment. Why is that?
Well, I think it's the way we've built the economy over the years. And when you look at the numbers, you'd find that over 80% of Nigerian workers are in sectors with very low productivity. So agriculture accounts for 30%, according to the NBS latest report in 2023. What I call non-tradable services accounts for almost about 40% or even more than agriculture now. So there's been a transition. If you read the works of structural transformation over the last decade, 2-3 decades, there's been a movement of labor from agriculture, but they're not going to manufacturing as we saw, or as we've seen it in many of the East Asian countries. They're going to non-tradable services, what I call low productivity services. Typical example, people are just hustling. People are doing petty trade, personal services, cleaning, security, POS now. I think that's the new thing in town. These are not jobs that can lift people out of poverty. So it's because we can't create jobs in large numbers and we can't expand the depth and breadth of the private sector, of our manufacturing sector, which is still single digit, 9% of GDP and the likes, or 8-9% of GDP. It just means that the sectors that should drive job creation are not growing as much. And part of it, you could allude that to reforms, power supply, infrastructure, and the absence of an industrial policy that can grow the capacity of players in that sector. So what do people do? They resort to hustling, and just doing anything to survive. And that's part of why you have so many people, hustling, working every day. In fact, one of the data we showed was that Nigerians are overworked. People work more than the average 40 hours a week. Most people work for 48 hours a week, including weekends. And because, of course, informal economy, you need more hours, you need more days to make a living, because what you're making really is not so much. And so you need to add Saturdays and, if, in some cases, Sundays, unlike what we've seen in other countries. So there's pressure on the citizens, and they just have to survive. That's why many people do these kinds of jobs. And our argument, and what we're putting forward, is that we just can't continue like this. There has to be a change, and Nigeria needs to focus on creating better jobs by expanding the private sector and making the business environment a bit more friendly.
Thank you very much, because I was about to ask you what the way out is, seeing as we've talked about the problems. But then let's talk about the two major policies that a number of business owners have complained about, saying that it's caused their finances and their business to bleed. That's, of course, talking about the unification of our currency and the subsidy removal. What would you say would be some of the moves? First of all, I don't know what your position is on these two policies. And what would you say the government can do? Because some people still complain that till now they haven't yet recovered from the effect these policies have had. So what short-term measures can be put in place to ensure that businesses can be able to endure before we get the long-term reward?
I would say that I have also not recovered from it because I'm feeling it as well. I mean, you go to the malls, no adverts, but I bought a plastic Coke for 500 naira, and I was like, like, I was out of the country for a while, came back, and then I'm buying Coke 500 just in less than a year. So it's tough, right? You can imagine the one that shocked me the most. There's a place I normally, just a normal eatery. I bought pomo for 1,000 naira for one. I'm like, this is, I mean,
yes, we should investigate you if you can afford pomo.
No, I mean, this is not even a highbrow restaurant,
Yeah.
Just a normal restaurant, I would say. Maybe they sell it elsewhere for 2,000. I don't know. But the key part of the question is that people are really finding it difficult now. And there's a stat by the NBS, that even buttresses the point that 66% of Nigerian households cannot afford to eat basic food, healthy food. 49% of Nigerian households skip a meal every day because they are hungry. So I don't think that stat should make any politician, any policymaker sleep at night. It is worrying, the fact that your people cannot feed. So yes, the reforms are painful, but one of the things I've argued is that even how you sequence a reform matters more than the reform itself in some cases. How you decide to remove subsidy matters a lot than removing the subsidy itself.
So could this have been done differently?
Precisely, in my view. I think it could have been measured. It could have been done in a way that will not transfer the burdens to the citizens. Because the way it is now, it is Nigerians that are subsidizing the government, right? The government is living large. Look at how much we're sharing at FAC meetings to the state governors and even the federal government. I think one of the ministers said over 2 trillion naira. That's huge. And so what's coming to the people? So that linkage between subsidy removal, how I see it is transferring the burden to the people and taking off a lot of burden from the government. So I don't think we can continue like this. I think interventions are needed. Pro-poor interventions, conditional cash transfers are still very important. Maybe I should apply for one if there is. I mean, because
they're just giving 330 billion naira to about 8 million households, and each of them got, I think, 25,000 naira according to the government. But the problem with that is there's still the transparency issue, the breach of trust. Nigerians saying, if you're saying you transfer 330 billion, who got it? Yeah. We need to see some clear explanations as to who and who got these monies.
Precisely, and it goes to how people perceive government and how people think that government should be even more transparent and trustworthy. Provide the data. I mean, these are not things that you should... Of course, you can't put people's names out there, but find a way to make sure that you are connecting to the people, showing the impact of what you're doing, who is getting these monies, interview them, have clips, go on road shows, let the majority know that the poor people are being supported.
Do you think that the people that are getting 25,000 naira mind that you are sharing their names out there?
No, it's a conditional cash transfer, so there has to be some mechanism in place by the government. There's a condition there. And that condition could be, how are you using the money in the first place? What are you using it for? Hope you are not going to the beer parlor and just using all the money to, buy all the, but there has to be, that's why it's conditional. It's not just a cash transfer. So you will sign an agreement like, we need this support. These are the terms. You have to make people know what you're doing. And especially in a system where trust levels between citizens and government is very
abysmal.
Low. So that transparency, that accountability, and disclosure of what you're doing, and ensuring that interview people, speak to them, let them know, let the majority know that these supports are going on. But I think that's even, by the way, some of the big issues that we need to look at. Government is richer now. How are we ensuring that government budgets trickles down to the MSMEs, not even MSMEs, the nano businesses, the nano micro businesses in your neighborhood? I think, how do we ensure that state government monies, and we can track, follow, and say our budget is XYZ billion naira? How do we ensure that it goes down to the people? And so one of the speeches during my presentation, one of the things I said was, small businesses has to feel the impact of government. And so these are key reforms that civil societies, NESG, budgets and the like, we have to keep pushing for transparency and accountability. Use all the social media platforms, come on sessions like this, talk about it, hold them to make sure that they deliver on these things, because it matters to the people that where the money is going to, it has to impact lives.
Yes, we have to follow the money. There has to be explanation for the money.
Yeah.
My final question to you, what is the one reform you would like to see, if you could choose only one reform, by 2030?
I can't choose one, I'm sorry. Because there are so many things competing for interest. Low inflation, we need inflation to go lower, we need to produce more, reduce wastage, just so food prices can be more affordable. But I think the ultimate one, I know my senior colleague earlier mentioned consistency, so I wouldn't say that he's done the job on that. But I would say industrialization. How do we create industries? Nigeria still imports industrial starch, and we're the world's largest producer of cassava, and that's one of the byproducts. Where are the firms turning this into industrial starch, not just cassava into gari? And funny enough, our large firms, they are looking for this, like this product, because they use it for so many other products itself. So how do we incentivize companies to go into that value chain? And you know what you're doing? You're creating jobs. You are creating opportunity for export. You are creating revenue for the government. And so I think that's the kind of reforms that would shift the needle in terms of creating better jobs and improve the lives.
I mean, I did read somewhere about our leather being exported, made into designer brands and then sold back to us, as designer. There's so much that needs to be done and can be done, which is why I'm glad that the NESG has put together this summit that creates a forum for all necessary stakeholders to come together and talk about it. Dr. Erumebor, thank you for your time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, I'll still continue to bring you all the necessary conversations right here at the Nigerian Economic Summit 2025. Do stay with us.